What's up, guys? Thank you for listening to Kane's After Dark podcast. If you could rate and review, and let's dive into this, guys. XFL, it may be cutting it for some people. It's not cutting it for your boy. That's why I'm very excited that spring practice is right around the corner. And what I want to do today is I want to discuss one thing that I think we should do for spring practice that I think would make it better. And I want to discuss two things that I wonder at the end of spring practice what will happen, what I think about it. And then I got a special guest, Cam Underwood from State of the U. Man, I did an interview with this guy, and it was amazing. Cam is full of information, full of knowledge. He loves Miami, great personality. So the interview was great. I had a great time doing it, and I think you guys are going to get a lot of information from it and a lot of entertainment from it. So with that said, let's get it. Now, I will admit that it gives us something. It's not going to be a total evaluation. If you remember this time last year, a lot of people was riding the Tate Martell train. If you remember this time last year, a lot of people was thinking we was about to see the most dynamic offense ever, the spread coast. And none of that happened. And we didn't know till after spring that a lot of that stuff was hype or didn't live up to what we thought it would be. So spring can't tell you a lot, but it gives us something to talk about. We get to see some of the younger guys. A lot of our younger guys are hurt, but we'll get to see some of the other guys. But I will say there's two things that I think about when I think about spring practice and what's going to happen at the end of spring practice. The first thing is, and I think if you ask anybody, any coach, what's the number one goal of spring practice? It is not to have any injuries. So I'm hoping, and anytime spring practice comes, we don't need to lose a prominent projected starter in spring practice. So I think that's why we have so many players on the injured list, because coaches are saying, hey, if there's even a risk of you getting re-injured, if you have a thought that you could possibly be injured, we don't want you on the field to make things worse. So that is the one thing I always think about when spring practice starts, and at the end, I always think, man, I really hope that we get through unscathed with no injuries, because honestly, if you want to look at something that's going to hurt this Miami team, it's depth. We can't afford to be losing players at a lot of positions. Offensive line, we just lost the offensive lineman today. Zach DiCastra, the redshirt sophomore, guard, 6'6", 290 pounds. Let me tell you, he's entered the transfer portal, or he's not with the team anymore. They don't know if he's going to enter the transfer portal. But let me tell you, we can't lose any more players on the offensive line. But if you can't stay and compete and win, and I don't know his story. I don't want to act like I know he's leaving because he don't think he's going to play, but he hasn't played much at Miami. But if I was an offensive lineman, especially a young offensive lineman, I would be so excited to compete, because in my eyes, I feel like most of the positions on the offensive line is up for the taking. So, we lose Zach. Zach's going to leave, so that opens up another scholarship. But we cannot have any injuries. The cornerback position cannot be hit. The linebacker position cannot be hit. You see what I'm saying? So the one thing that I'm looking at and that I'm hoping at the end of spring camp, end of spring practice, I can come back on here and say, well, we got through without any new injuries. The next thing is, will we have any transfers? Transfers always happen, and a lot of time it usually happens towards the spring practice at the end, because you come in thinking you're going to compete, and then you start to see the rotations, and then you start to see who's playing or maybe who's not. I hope we don't get any transfers. Like I said, I like our talent that we have at a lot of the starting positions, but Miami cannot have any depth problems, so I hope we don't have any new transfers, and I hope we get fully healthy. An idea that I've always thought about, I don't know how it would work. I don't know how you would put it together, but I feel like it's something that I would love if it was a controlled atmosphere. I think our players would get better. if we did a joint spring practice or a joint spring game. Let's be honest here. When we're watching those spring games, it is exciting and it's fun, and it definitely gives me something to watch and to talk about because Lord knows I'm ready for football to get back going. But could you imagine if we did a joint spring practice with the Florida, with the FIU, with the Florida Atlantic, just did a joint spring game, something of that sort that was controlled. The NFL does it. You know, they always end up fighting and stuff like that on Hard Knocks when they do it. But listen, if you can control it to whereas you can limit injuries and things of that nature, I mean, injuries are going to happen. I believe you're going to see top level competition. You're going to see our players getting better if they can get to go against some competition. So tweet at me at NMDTV or at Grant Long on Twitter. Most of you guys follow me. Tweet at me and let me know what you think about that. I believe if we did a couple spring practice that were joint practice, we got to see one-on-ones, we got to see different things of that nature. I think it would be a blast. Now, the spring game will be held at Travis Powell, and that's going to be cool. But what we just figured out is a lot of people said, hey, since it's the ACC network, we're going to have it live. We're probably going to have the spring game live. And that's not going to happen. The ACC network just put out their schedule, and this is what it's looking like. This is the teams that they will cover for their spring games. They're going to cover Duke. They're going to cover NC State. They're going to cover Clemson, Boston College, Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, North Carolina, Florida State? Florida State? And Virginia Tech. So Miami doesn't make the cut for the ACC network. I doubt anybody else will be streaming it. Maybe somebody on YouTube will get there and have a good connection and can stream it. I would hope that the university with the technology that we have, they can stream it because I know a lot of people will be going, but there's people there's Miami Hurricane fans everywhere. Everywhere we rocking with the U. And we would love to see it televised. Not only that, it would be fun to be able to record it. That way we could break down the film and kind of look at different situations and kind of have something to look at when we're looking at our new players going up against the older guys or going up against different competition rather than them keep looking at their huddle tapes. You know, I can only watch Don Chaney's huddle tape so much. I can only watch Jalen Knighton's huddle tape so much. I'm ready to see him go up against action. It would be great to see him in a spring game and it to be televised or streamed by somebody, you know? So, yeah, man, that's what I think the ideal of having a joint spring game, at least a joint spring game, would be entertaining, competitive, fun, and both teams would benefit for it. If you're going up against a team that you're not going to face during the regular season, it would be okay. You know, they're not going to remember your plays or whatever. I mean, nowadays, most people are running the same shit anyway. So I don't see why it wouldn't be a good idea. Let me know. But just to reiterate, guys, the two things that I'm looking for when spring practice is said and done is, will there be any transfers or will there be any new injuries? I hope neither of those happened. And then also, why not have a joint spring game? Why not have De'Aaron King getting to slice and dice somebody? You know what I'm saying? I think that would be dope. Now, I talked to Cam Underwood about what he thinks about spring practice. Who does he think is going to be the most improved? Who do we think we need as a team to improve? I asked him about last year, about how the season ended. I asked him who's going to make the biggest impact. I asked him a lot. And that's what we're going to get to. Let's get Cam Underwood on the line. We'll be back with Cam after this break. Real quick, guys, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters. Because of you guys, I'm able to put out consistent content and better quality content. If you're thinking about becoming a Patreon member, I do want to let you know you'll get access to a 24/7 group chat. You'll get the podcast a day earlier. And during the season, you'll get access to the instant reaction podcast. So you'll get to hear my thoughts podcast form right after every Miami Hurricane game and a lot of other exclusive content. Get signed up today, www.patreon.com/NMDTV. Even if you sign up for the $1 tier, you still get access to all exclusive content. If you want to support more, I'll be forever grateful because all that is going into my ultimate goal of becoming a full-time content creator in 2020 and also upgrading equipment for the show. I really want to thank you ahead of time, and I definitely want to give a shout out to those who are already signed up. Now back to Canes After Dark. All right, guys, we're here with Cam Underwood, managing editor of State of the U. Cam, how you doing today, brother?
Yo, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. And if you guys know of me, then great. If not, then I hope that you follow us over at stateoftheu.com for comprehensive Miami Hurricanes coverage of, well, the main sports at least. And we try to dabble on the other ones too.
All right. And Cam, I actually learned about you from YouTube. I do college football on YouTube as well. I've seen several interviews from you. How did State of the U get started? I've always wondered that.
State of the U was a fan-run blog for years. It was under a different name and then was approached when SB Nation was expanding the network of websites that they had under their banner, and the transition was made then. And this was actually before I even came on with State of the U. The former managing editor, Lieutenant Philip Nolan was his pseudonym. He came up with the actual moniker of State of the U, which is a very strong name, I think, and obviously with a kind of a tongue-in-cheek nod to some political things once a year, we do get a little bit more traffic when people start tagging us for the State of the Union address. So there was that kind of a thing, and it just made its way over and is the Miami Hurricanes blog on the SB Nation network, and we've just been growing from there. So after Lieutenant Philip Nolan left, then Jerry Steinberg took over as managing editor, and I had already come on as a contributor then and just kind of worked my way up and around. And then when Jerry decided to move on, then I became managing editor, and that was almost 6 years ago now, or 6 football seasons at least, so 5.5 years. We have a rotating group of contributors. So some have been with us, like myself, for a long time. Others were with us for a short time. Even still others were with us for a short time and then progressed up to full-time careers in the world of sports journalism, which is great to see.
All right, yeah, guys. So make sure you check out for State of the U. They put out good content, and I know a couple of the contributors, or I've had them on the show, Kevin Fielder, Marsh. So y'all check them out. And now we got Cam Underwood on the show. So we're going to preview spring practice right around the corner. But just to kind of go back a little bit, Cam, what were just your general thoughts about how the season ended last year?
I mean, it was terrible. There's no two ways about it, and there's no mincing words for it either. It was atrocious. It was unacceptable. And I wrote it in the good, the bad, the ugly recaps for a couple of games. It was fireable. I mean, just the performance of the team, the way that it tanked, the way that they quit on the season, for the most part, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It was fireable. It really was. And I mean, we saw that Dan Enos was let go, and so was Butch Berry, his colleague from Central Michigan. Previously, who had experience as an NFL assistant offensive line coach, but those two worked hand in hand, and the offense that they built and crafted failed. So they had to go. Taylor Stubblefield is a nomad. He's on his 8th job in 10 years, I want to say. So him leaving as the wide receivers coach, that was pretty expected. When we hired him, I said 1, maybe 2 years for him. So losing him was not really a thing that kind of caught me by surprise. But I mean, it was the defense was good enough to compete for championships, whether that's ACC, whether that's Coastal Division, ACC overall. I won't necessarily say national, but I mean, it was that kind of a defense where we could have and should have been infinitely better than we were. And the way that the season ended, I mean, it was piss poor, and you can't get around that. The bowl game was terrible. Losing to FIU for the first time in program history is atrocious. Losing to Duke for consecutive years for the first time in program history is atrocious. There's no two ways about that. And that was the frustrating part because, again, for the better part of 15 years, Miami has done less with more talent than any team in the country. There's no team on the schedule that we played with as much talent as us, with the two exceptions of Florida and Florida State. No other team did, but we found ways to lose to FIU of all kind of people. It was terrible. And I mean, anybody who says that it was anything other than terrible, I would really like to hear the explanation as to why.
Cam, why do you think that is? Why do you think, we've been through coaches, we've been through players. Why can't we seem to get back to at least winning the ACC? I mean, we've only won the Coastal once.
We did have the other one where we tied and would have gone to the ACC championship game, but self-imposed a sanction that year. So that is worth noting as well. But yeah, we have one outright ACC Coastal Division championship. To your point, I think that it is because they're trying to, I mean, you bring in people who have a mindset and a mentality, a program and a system that they want to run. And for the most part, they've done that, these prior coaches, at the exclusion of evaluating what's going on the field. If you look at, if you go back to Al Golden, go look at the offenses that Al Golden's teams put up. Those offenses put up numbers. I mean, big time numbers. The defense was atrocious, but he said, oh, this is the defense I want to run. This is the guy I want to run this defense. And Al Golden directed Mark D'Onofrio to run a certain kind of defense. And then he was intractable about changing it when the product on the field dictated that something needed to be changed. Then you flipped it to Mark Richt, and it was the opposite. You brought in Manny Diaz to run the defense that Miami should be running with the talent and the players that we have. So that all of a sudden takes off. But then you undo what Al Golden did on offense, which was actually good if you go back and look at it. And then you want to run what you want to run, and that's fine. But then Mark Richt didn't want to give up control. He didn't want to. He wanted to call plays, so he said, "I'm going to do that." He was the only person on the staff who had called plays. He ended up not wanting to fire his son, which needed to be done at quarterback's coach. There were things that he needed to do to fix the offense that he was unwilling to do. So I think that for the 15 years that we're talking about it being really, really bad, it's been head coaches being stuck in mindsets and paradigms and schemes that don't work on one side of the ball or the other, and being unwilling to change it to get it to where it should be. I've been saying for years, almost as long as I've been on Twitter, that Miami should have gone to a spread offense. And there's different kinds of spread. There's spread, air raid, like a Mike Leach, Washington State, that's going to throw it 80 times a game, but you're going to throw 20 swing passes, which are ostensibly extensions of the run game. You can run spread to run, which a lot of teams do around the country. There's variations to it, but I think that Miami should have done it because that's the kind of talent that we have in our recruiting base. And every team down here in South Florida does that, with the exception of the teams like a Belen Jesuit who doesn't have the talent to compete with big time teams. So they still run a wing T. Cool. That's one school. Cypress Bay did it for years with Mark Wandolo as their head coach because that's what he had been coaching since the 80s. That was two examples of teams that have not run spread systems. But if you look at all of these teams around South Florida, from any level, 8A, 7A, all the way on down, a great team, a small team, but teams where you're getting recruits from, they all run versions of spread. Why are we not doing something like that? So it's just this intractable nature of not wanting to change. And I get it, because if you come in and you got this job, you got the job at Miami for a reason, because of what you've previously done. So you don't want to necessarily come in and immediately change who you are, but you have to evaluate the process. And if the results are not proper, then the process needs changing. And this is what Al Golden and Mark Richt failed to do.
All right. So Manny, and people are giving him a lot of credit for this. Manny sees the problem with Dan Enos, fires them, brings in Rhett Lashley from SMU, who's going to give us what we all want, the high-flying, a little bit of an air raid, spread offense. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, do we give Manny credit for that hire, or is it just it had to happen because the offense was such a train wreck last year?
I think both. I think we give credit because he did what needed doing, but still are questioning why it needed doing, because I mean, the offense that we got from Dan Enos was not what we were billed for it being. If you remember all of those pressers early, it was, we're going to be diverse and variegated, and we're going to stress and challenge defenses by doing things that, they're not prepared for. That happened very infrequently, if ever. And the one example that I really have about that, well, there's a couple. One, in the Florida game, on that drive, that first drive when Jaron Williams got sacked, Jeff Thomas ran a beautiful, beautiful double move in the middle of the field and was butt naked wide open doing backflips and cartwheels, but the offensive line didn't give Jaron any time to see him. So I saw that and said, oh, if you can scheme up a route like that, then maybe, okay, it didn't work on this play because the protection wasn't there, but maybe we'll see that it works out later. It very rarely did. You saw the one against Louisville when the guy was spinning around looking at the sideline when D. Wiggins was running a post off of a double move on the boundary. That was great. But, think about these times, okay, in the Louisville game, you did the fake tunnel screen wheel route to Will Mallory for touchdown 5. That was awesome. But, if I'm sitting here and I'm really counting down the 3, 4, 5 times a year that you really scheme something open like you're talking about you're going to be able to do, then that's a problem. So, yeah, it's a little bit of both. It is questioning why the offense failed so much, why we did not get the scheme that it was said that we were going to receive from Dan Enos as our head, offensive coordinator. But then also giving Manny credit for seeing that what he thought we were going to get, we did not get, and knowing that he has a shorter leash than others because this is his first time as a head coach. So he didn't have another year to say, oh, well, Dan Enos might get it together. Oh, whatever. He saw that there was a change that needed to be made. And unlike other coaches who have been here over the last 10, 15 years, he made it. So, again, question why it had to be made and the evaluation of Dan Enos at first, but credit for making the move that needed to be made by bringing in Lashley to run a different kind of offense.
So, Manny, we end the season off terrible. Me as a fan, I'm saying, I don't want to hear anything until we kick off, okay? But then we go out and get D'Eriq King. We get Rhett Lashley. We get Quincy Roche. We add Ed Reed to the chief of staff. We end up flipping Avante Williams. So we got a lot of wins in the offseason. Let me ask you, which out of those names I just named, Ed Reed, Quincy Roche, D'Eriq King, Rhett Lashley, and Avante Williams deciding to come to Miami instead of Florida, which one was the most shocking to you?
The most shocking to me?
Yeah, the one that you just couldn't believe this happened.
Avante Williams.
Williams?
Yeah, I think that was the one that was the least likely. Okay, like the Rhett Lashley thing, he was on the list of, guys who were out there as offensive coordinators. Maybe they want to step up. We're evaluating, okay, where could we go to get a spread type system, someone to run it. So, was it like Rhett Lashley was maybe on the list as saying, hey, I want to work at Miami? No, but that wasn't really shocking because Manny had to have been going out and looking at guys to run spreads. D'Eriq King, that fit because he's from Texas. He went to Houston, played against Rhett Lashley in that offense. And, Shane Buechele was very good for them, but he's not the athlete that for SMU, that is, when Rhett Lashley was a coordinator. But D'Eriq King is a much better athlete and player. So if you think about that, look, I did these numbers with a guy who's not as good as you. Now come down here and play in this system with me, and I'll unlock all of the talent that you have in you. Is the pitch to D'Eriq King. So when we went spread, okay, D'Eriq King, that's the thing that fit. Quincy Roche, it was said he was basically waiting to see if D'Eriq King was coming to Miami, and if he came to Miami, then he would follow. Roche, that is. Okay, cool. But yeah, Avante Williams, I always thought that he was going to go to Florida. When he committed to Oregon, nobody thought he was going to go all the way out there. And the fact of the matter is, and the thing that was for me, the most important factor is Avante Williams has 2 children. So I figured, look, if you want to be around, in your kids' lives and everything, which I hope that he does, it's much easier to get to DeLand from Gainesville, which is only about 45 minutes away, than it is from Coral Gables. But the difference was he has a relationship with this staff that's been recruiting him since he was in 8th grade. And he first committed to Miami when Lorenzo Lingard, his cousin, committed as a 10th grader, rising 11th grader. And that connection to the coaching staff of Ephraim Bonda, John Packey, and Manny Diaz over the course of almost 5 years is what won out. I just didn't think it was going to go that way. So I think that's why I say that was the most unexpected move of those, especially for me. And like people are like, oh, you did the reverse jinx of saying that, Avante Williams was going to go to Florida. I really honestly and truly believed that. Then I heard on signing day from a couple of people who would know, they said, you should start writing. And I just said, okay. Because I've gotten in a habit of, I try to have very quick reflexes. So anybody that commits, we try to have a welcome to the U piece up on the website, within probably 10 minutes is my initial goal. And then for signing day, I write profiles for every player and everything. And those are about 2,000 words, and you're evaluating the game and embedding the highlights and doing all that stuff. And like I said, I got one text and one phone call before, like in the morning time. And both people who would know said, you should start writing. And I said, okay, cool. And I did. I had already written the Avante Williams is going to Florida piece previous to signing day because that's what I thought was going to happen. So yeah, I think that was the one that I least expected personally, even though some other people, they read the tea leaves or they had something that I didn't and they understood that situation. They were like, oh yeah, Avante was always coming, and they thought that or knew that. I will admit that I did not think or know that until, I was told that then. But yeah, that was the one of those 5 or 4 that was the most uncertain for me heading into that decision.
Who do you think is going to have the biggest impact out of those guys that we got this offseason?
It's a tie between Rhett Lashley and De'Aaron King because they're linked hand in hand. Quincy Roche is going to be very good at defensive end, but we do have talent on defense at every level. So he's adding in another elite talent to a unit that has elite talents. So it's like a diamond amongst diamonds. Like, it matters, and I love having him, but it's not changing anything. Like in a functional kind of a way or foundational kind of a way. Avante Williams, very talented, but if you look at the safety room, that's probably the most talented room next to defensive end in the defense. You got multiple guys who are going to beat NFL players in the secondary or at the safety position alone. So could Avante Williams factor in special teams, maybe play some nickel, maybe on things like that? Sure, but again, is he a game changer day one? No. Rhett Lashley is going to rebuild this offense. That is my belief, because we've seen the offenses that he's run and the scheme that he employs is very different from what we have seen down here. Excuse my stuttering. And then De'Aaron King is the guy to run it, who's averaging 3.5 touchdowns in a game played. Like, what are we? No, he had 4 per game that he played last year, or 3. But he had 50 touchdowns combined in 2018, 35 passing and 15 rushing, I believe it is. One of a few players to ever have that kind of combination of touchdowns to get to his 50, because we've had players who have passed for 50 touchdowns in a year. But he's a dynamic talent, the likes of which Miami has seldom, if ever, seen at quarterback. I mean, if you think back to a guy like a Derek Crudup in the early 2000s. I think he and I were freshman brothers back in 2000. He was a guy who was a dynamic dual threat guy, but he wasn't the starter. He wasn't the guy that we built things around. And no disrespect to Mr. Crudup, he's not as talented or as good as De'Aaron King is from high school and college. Even though Derek Crudup was great at Deerfield Beach High School, it's a different level of player. So now you have a new scheme with a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback handpicked to run that. It has to be the combination of those two guys having the biggest impact for this team, again, if we're going to move forward and be successful to the level that Miami should be.
All right, guys, we got Cam Underwood, managing editor of State of the U, on the line with us. So Rhett Lashley, De'Aaron King, you just talked about him. I know everybody's excited about that head into spring. I'm excited about that. Not naming those guys, not naming, just how the offense is going to look, and of course De'Aaron King, because we all can't wait to see that for spring. What are some things that you're going to be paying attention to spring practice?
Things that I want to see spring practice are who steps up at wide receiver. We have a lot of guys with talent, and in a new system and a new scheme, I want to see who rises to the top. I think that we have guys who should if you look at a Mark Pope, he should be your number one receiver in this scheme. If the Prochet kid, who runs, maybe a 4.7 and whatnot, if he did all the numbers he did at SMU, and then you have Mark Pope, who's a, sub 4.5 guy, playing that same role, it stands to reason that Mark Pope should finally break out. He was a 5-star kind of recruit. He was a recruit who Southridge was losing the state championship game his junior year. They ran a play up the left sideline to D. Wiggins, and it was incomplete. They call a timeout on 4th down in the ball game. I think it was 72 yards away. And Mark Pope goes to the coach and he says, run the same play, put me over there at the X. I'm going to score. We're going to win a state championship. And they did. Like, he's that kind of guy to call his shot and then go do it. I want to see if he steps up. And if not him, I want to see which one of these freshmen step up, because we have plenty of talent coming in from the freshman class as well. And then, other guys, Mike Harley, you got a D. Wiggins, who I already mentioned. There's talent there, and I want to see who steps up, because there's no defined leader on the field for that group yet. Obviously, I need to see what happens with the offensive line, whether it shuffles or stays the same, and how they improve, because I'm not going to accept regression. It has to be improvement from them. And then at linebacker, I just want to see how things shake out. I know that Sam Brooks is out for the spring with an injury, so this is a chance for Avery Huff to really step up, Zach McLeod to step into a bigger leadership role, because even though he's been here for 4 years already, heading into his 5th year, I mean, he was the third, the one who was not as highly thought of for his play on the field as opposed to Quarterman and Pinckney. It was always those two, and then, McLeod too. McLeod has a chance to really, really, really step up and make a name for himself this year, so I want to see that happen. And then just in the secondary, cornerback, who's gonna be the guy or the guys? We have Al Blades and DJ Ivey are juniors now. Trajan Bandy moved on to the NFL. To Corey Couch, Christian Williams, and then Marcus Clark is already on campus, or no, he's not on campus. That's a shame. But yeah, at cornerback, I want to see how they step up as well, because again, I think that the safety position is well manned. They have elite talent, and many of them. So the depth and talent at safety is great. At cornerback, I need to see some large strides being made, and I think that will happen because Mike Rumpf is a great developer of talent. So the recruiting at cornerback leaves much to be desired. But when guys get on campus here, Mike Rumpf makes them better. And it is time for Al Blades and DJ Ivey to take that leap into their junior year to really help solidify this defense moving forward.
All right, so I want to go back to something you talked about with Mark Pope. And Mark Pope has been, ever since we recruited him, he's been talked about a lot as a possible great wide receiver. The same thing last year, Jeremiah Payton was supposed to be a great wide receiver, which he didn't get a lot of the chance. I expect a lot of him this year. But why do you think players like Mark Pope, up to this point, haven't really lived up to the hype they had when they came in? I mean, the same thing with Brian Hightower. He's in the transfer portal now, but do you think there's a development problem at the wide receiver position? Or, there's been rumors about them not being able to get the playbook down. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think it is a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Those guys are All-Americans coming in from high school, and you need to learn how to work at the next level to continue to progress your skills. It's been reported so many times that Mark Pope had a trouble with the playbook that, there's too much smoke for there not to be some fire for that, and it's just, you need to get chances in the offense, first of all, but you got to earn chances. And then it is a little deflating, especially for a wide receiver on, if I'm running this route hard and I'm wide open, if, I'm not getting the ball, or getting the ball at least thrown to me, because it's tough, and that's why you've seen all these stats like, yards per route run, because you're not getting the ball every time that you run a route. But it's just kind of the ups and downs of youth, too. Like, you're going to be a little impetuous, a little bit emotional, like, oh, well, I was open that play. Like, yeah, and I know every receiver thinks that they're open every play, but that's fine. You didn't get the ball this time. Let's line it up and run hard again, because if you're open, I'm going to find you. But you have to trust that that's going to happen. So, and then the offense was just not really conducive to, a lot of receivers being great. It took Amon Richards to really unlock greatness. And it was because, I mean, Amon Richards, unfortunately, he had to retire due to a career-ending injury, but he should have been 3 years and a first-round draft pick from what we saw from him. Even his sophomore year when he was battling that hamstring injury, he was so fast with 75% that he's still running away from guys in the ACC, Duke, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh. He's running away from guys at 75%. But if you don't have that kind of elite talent, then you got to work. And I don't think that there was anybody around really to prove or show to them how to work until last year with KJ Osborne. And yeah, he was 23 years old. Yeah, he was a fifth-year senior transfer from Buffalo and everything. But he just going out and exuding what a work ethic was, I think that hopefully rubbed off on the rest of these guys. Now, if you're Hightower, you came in as a freshman, you had a touchdown in the opener against LSU after it was already garbage time, but you still scored against LSU last year in 2018. You think maybe you should have a bigger role, and he's 6'3", 205, so why are you not putting him out there? I mean, it's a little bit of him and it's a little bit of the coaching. So, it's not necessarily always one issue, but there's many things, and it has been most commonly seen, I would say, at wide receiver, where guys are not living up to their billing coming in for whatever reason it might be. So hopefully, with a more friendly scheme, especially when it comes to the passing game, I would hope some of these guys are able to find space and utilize their skill sets. And again, it's a thing where at wide receiver, everybody's not going to do everything. Everybody's not going to be the entire package. But at the college level, at least, you should be able to find a role for somebody. If Mark Pope only does 3 things well, then you run him out there for 70% of the plays and have him do those 3 things. I don't need him to do the other things. I don't need him to be 6'5", because he's not. So I'm not going to put him in those positions. But again, it has to be a player-friendly scheme as well. So it's a little bit on both sides.
And speaking on that Brian Hightower situation, let's say Manny called you up and said, hey, Cam, Brian Hightower wants to come back on the team. What would you tell Manny? Are you okay with bringing him back, or do you think, it sends the wrong message?
I need to know all the circumstances on his departure and his proposed return. And it's kind of like with the Jeff Thomas thing last year. Everyone was saying, oh, we don't want him back. We don't want him back, blah, 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 blah. If it ended up working out because Manny and Jeff talked about why he left the way that he did, what was going on, and him coming back and yada, 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 what the parameters would be for that. I think it would need to be the same thing for Brian Hightower. I don't necessarily think that I'm not going to come in with a predetermination on which way I would go on that. I would just need to hear where he is and everything. And I mean, it's like a dating relationship. You know what I mean? Like if you have a significant other and they want to leave and then they want to come back, like, oh yeah, let's just do what we were doing. Like, nah, clearly if we're doing things the way that we were, if our connection, relationship, engagement, whatever you want to talk about is the same that it previously was, that's just going to lead you to the same spot where you left in the way that you did. So I want to know why you want to be here. What is different about you and our connection and our situation that's going to make this successful moving forward? And if you don't have anything, it's just like, well, I'm alone now. Okay, Brian Hightower, like you made the choice to leave. You know what I mean? Like, and I get that, you thought, hey, maybe at this size, with this pedigree, breaking records at Calabasas High School as a sophomore with 88 catches, 1,400 yards, and 22 touchdowns. I thought that, everybody would remember that. And when I hit the portal, everybody would want me. But I got out there and I found out that nobody wants me and I'm all alone. So I'm just trying to come back because I would rather have this, which is not the greatest thing, as opposed to having nothing. No. But if you really want to be here and like, look, I didn't necessarily vibe with the wide receivers coach. I'm trying to work. I'm trying to grind, like, then that's a conversation maybe to be had. So again, I'm not going to close down on the thought of maybe bringing a Brian Hightower back. But I need to know both sides of the situation. And I'm going to cut you off at the pass because I know that the next logical step is, what about Jaron Williams? Jaron Williams needs to go somewhere else. And Jaron Williams, and I know you're going to ask that because I know it's the same thing. Like, oh, he's in the transfer portal. We haven't heard about him going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. Jaron Williams, because the only way that Jaron Williams comes back is if he starts. And Jaron Williams is not going to start, at least not this year. And then so you're going to sit another year and you're going to wait around. Like, we tried it out. It didn't work. I wish you the best. I think that Jaron Williams has a world of talent. I think he's going to go somewhere and be really, really good. But that one is different. And I'll say this to close this, because you only play one quarterback at a time, but we can run 5 wide. So if I bring Brian Hightower back to the room, I'm not basing everything this season off of him. If I bring Jaron Williams back, ostensibly, if it's not this year, it's next year, that I'm basing the entire success or failure of our season on him in that situation. I'm not comfortable with that one.
You're right. Going into the spring, okay? At the end of the year, at the end of the spring practice, at the end of the spring game, let's say they give out a most improved player award for the offense and defense.
Okay.
For Miami to be successful, what 2 players need to get those awards? So what 2 players do we as a team need to see improve for us to have the most success next season?
That's a really good question. The most improved on offense has to be whoever is playing tackle, whether it's Zion Nelson, Kylian Herbert, Campbell, Scaife. I would prefer like one of the sophomores, so like a Zion Nelson or John Campbell. But yeah, I would say one of those guys, whoever's playing offensive tackle, that needs to be it. Because if your offensive tackle is stepping up, then that means you're hopefully the rest of the line is elevating their play as well. But that's a key position, and we've seen the failings of that. And the failing at the offensive tackle positions both basically cost us the Florida game. And I know that it's not a single source issue or anything. There were other factors, but were the offensive tackles better, we would not have given up 10 sacks, therefore, henceforth, So that would be the one on offense. On defense, Christian Williams, cornerback. Because with all due respect to Corey Couch, we don't need he's only 5'8", 5'7.5". You know what I mean? Like, there's
Corey
a limit.
Got that fight though. He got that.
He does, but he doesn't have
confidence.
the size. I know. I hear you. And I want him to be out there. And he does have that fight. He is that dog and everything. But it's different when you got somebody who's 6'2", 200 pounds outside on the boundary with that kind of performance. And like Corey Couch can't help that he's 5'7.5", 5'8". Just like Trajan Bandy couldn't help that he's 5'8", 5'9". Everybody knows that. And it's just a fact of life. But while I think that Corey Couch can be a role player, he cannot be the best defensive back on a championship caliber college football team. You cannot. Because if you think about it, if you're going up against Clemson, you got Justin Ross, Frank Ladson, T. Higgins, and all them 6'4", 6'5" guys who are fast, strong, and athletic as hell, and they're already 7, 8 inches taller than you. That's not going to work. It's not. I'm sorry. So I need Christian Williams to step up because hopefully, again, Blades and Ivy are juniors, and they're already at a level where they're not necessarily all ACC, but they're starting caliber players. They will have maybe their progression will be less in like the change, but more impactful at the top of the defense. But I need Christian Williams to close that gap. I need his delta change to be huge. I need that progression jump to really make a difference because, again, I need a guy with his size, his physical build to step up more because to play at the level that Miami aspires to play at, to compete at the level that Miami aspires to compete at, we need guys with size all over this roster to do the things that they can do. And that's why, to me, it's more important for Christian Williams than to Corey Couch because, again, to Corey Couch is he's a dog. He has that mentality. He has all of those things, but his size is a major detriment. It just is. He cannot be your number one cornerback. It is not possible. Even if you saw this past year, we rotated Trajan Bandy, who's a full inch taller than Corey Couch, off of the number one cornerback slot in situations because you cannot just have a guy who's 5'9" with average athleticism being your best corner. That's not a recipe for success in today's world of college football. That's why Christian Williams having the greatest improvement this spring is more important and more impactful to the success of this team, both this year and moving forward for me.
That makes a lot of sense. This 2020 class, the most early enrollees that Miami has had. I know we got a lot of injuries, but who do you think is going to have the best spring out of this 2020 class?
The best spring out of 2020. Let's see. I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path. And I know people are going to say, what? But I'm going to go with wide receiver Keyshawn Smith. He was the last guy to enroll this spring. So if you don't know, Keyshawn Smith was committed to Washington State. He's from San Diego Lincoln High School and was released from his letter of intent when Mike Leach left for Mississippi State. Stephen Field, who had worked out on the West Coast, had a relationship there, knew that Keyshawn Smith was a Miami fan, said, hey, what are you thinking about Coral Gables? Maybe blah, blah. They worked behind the scenes, got him enrolled on the last day to register for classes, took a red-eye flight, was in school that next Wednesday morning, and he's here on campus now as the fourth wide receiver in this class. This is a guy who is maybe the most underrated recruit in this class nationally. He's 6'1", 180 pounds. His brothers are like 6'5" and 6'6". His dad is like 6'5", so he could potentially grow. And he has blazing speed. If you watch his huddle highlights, which I put up in his recruiting notebook, he runs similarly to what Stacey Coley moved like on the field. Now, I know that there were those things of Stacey Coley getting dinged up every time he caught the ball, blah, 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 whatever. But if you look at it coming from high school, they move in a similar way. It looks like Keyshawn Smith is gliding, and he's not running hard, but he's running past fast, athletic FBS recruits who have the angle on him in his highlights, and he's just gone. Like, this is a guy who can come in here and really, grab some of this playing time that I'm talking about being available at wide receiver. He's a guy who has skills. He's a guy who has athleticism, who might not be at the top of everybody's recruiting list or their favorite player. People are going to say, oh, Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback, whichever one of the running backs you like, I think that this offense is a perfect fit for what Keyshawn Smith does. It was a perfect fit for what he was going to do probably at Washington State. And I think that he could be, by the end of spring, really, rising up in the eyes and estimation of people.
Yeah, I think that's the name that most people wouldn't have said. A lot of people, they bring up Tyler Van Dyke or Jalen Rivers. So, and the thing about Keyshawn Smith is when he did decide to come to Miami, his tape looked good, but a lot of people that cover the West Coast over there, they just started, shouting out praises to him about how good he was. So him being at spring, that's a guy I'm going to keep a lookout for as well. That was a good one. 2021 class, I know a lot of people would love to hear your opinion on what would satisfy you in this 2021 class, and do you have a couple guys that you think Miami has to get in this next upcoming class?
Well, Miami needs to continue to stack classes. If you had the 13th best class this year, coming off of 6 and 7, then if you have a winning season, which I believe is, the hope and goal of everybody, then Miami should push for the top 10 nationally and even above that if possible. So that's really what I'm looking at, because that's what we need. And I wrote a feature on stateoftheu.com. It's still up on the front page 2 years ago, called The Recruiting Rules, about how teams build championship caliber rosters. And if you go down all of those rules, get a quarterback every year, recruit locally first, things like that, it lays out the how to do it. And I think that Miami should follow those precepts, because most everybody does, with like the exception of Notre Dame, because Notre Dame has no local recruiting base. They're a national team, or a national school, so they have to go and recruit nationally. But yeah, so I'm thinking, this class has to be top 15, I'll say, to really continue to build the kind of roster and program that we want to have. So that's more 4 stars and 5 stars and 3 stars. You're getting guys, again, big guys who move fast. And that can be relative to their position. So defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive line, linebacker, and then specialists as well. Guys who might be 2 inches too short and 20 pounds too light. But if that guy that I just described happens to be Roscoe Parrish, then it's okay because you have, electrifying speed to make up for that. In terms of must-get recruits, I actually wrote a piece in 2018 about must-get recruits as well, and I don't believe that they exist because there's always another thing. There's always another quarterback. There's always another wide receiver, running back, whomever. It's the fact of if you miss on a guy and then your replacement isn't marginally the same, and there's a big gap in difference between the guy you missed on and the guy that you ended up taking for having a warm body on your roster, then that's where issues happen. The people that are the guys that I know in South Florida that everybody's going to talk about this year, number one safety in America, James Williams, because he is a physical freak. He's 6'5", 6'5.5", 200 pounds. He's not going to be an outside linebacker, which people previously thought because he was just so big, so young. But he's a safety and with uncommon size and incredible speed and skill. He's a guy who's probably not going to come here. So then where do you go at safety? If you have a Marcus Tate, Tate or Tatum, one of the two, I forget which one. But from Marcus Tate from University School, he's a 5-star offensive tackle. From Fort Lauderdale, right around the corner. Cool, good, great, glorious. We're going to get him, right? Nope, he's already committed to Clemson. Cool, so there's another top local guy who's not coming here. You have Ja'Cory Brooks at Booker T. Washington, wide receiver, who's been known in the game since he was in 7th grade, another huge guy at 6'3", 205. Is he going to come here? Probably not. Okay, you got Braylon Brown from Chaminade Madonna, another wide receiver of incredible size, speed, talent, and skill. Is he going to come here? Maybe, but currently, I'm thinking that's not likely. So the 4 top guys that I've named are either committed elsewhere or probably not going to come here. So where do we go? That's the question. You got to find talent that is similar or the same, and sometimes you're not going to find that. There's not another 6'5", 200-pound safety around like a James Williams. They made one of those. But can you find another good safety? You know what I mean? It's possible. We did just get Avante Williams, 5'11", 190 pounds, but he can fly. But he's still 6 inches shorter than James Williams. So if you're looking for somebody with that size, now we have to look elsewhere. So, there are plenty of names, and I know that I've named 4 people, and people listening to this podcast are probably saying, oh, what about insert player here, insert player here, insert player here, the Jason Marshall and Corey Collier at Palmetto, the Anthony Brantley, the defensive tackle who's moved around to a couple schools. I don't even know where he is right now. If you have all these other guys locally, there's plenty of them. And regardless of the name, Miami has to do a better job of getting their share of the top end talent from South Florida to stay home in Coral Gables. I don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to do it, but that's the end story. Is it has to be done. We have to be able to keep more of the elite talent in this local area home. And that's going to be a big story in this 2021 recruiting class, because to get to a top 15, top 10 or higher class, that means that of this group that is local, and trust, there are plenty of very good players from the Palm Beach County northern border all the way south. If you recruit nowhere else, you can live in that tri-county area and build the foundation of a top 10 class, but only if you close on the guys that they're there to close on. So it is now incumbent upon the staff to do that while also looking nationally to select and augment the class that you're building from home first. But that has to happen. And yeah, it's going to be tough because everybody comes down here. Everybody knows every year that Alabama looks for a wide receiver, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Texas, whomever else. They want to come down here and get guys. But you got to play defense, and it's not going to be the fence that Howard Schnellenberger put up, especially with the proliferation of digital film and the internet, so you can have guys outside of your local area be more widely known, which is helping with national recruiting. So it might not be the fence or the wall, but you still got to play defense and keep more of the top guys home, and that is going to be the key to this recruiting class.
All right, and I agree with you, and I think the way we crack that top 10 is take advantage of this easy schedule and win some games. And I think that's what you said at the beginning. We have to win games. Guys, we got Cam Underwood, managing editor of the State of the U. Make sure you check out State of the U for all your Miami Hurricane content. Cam, I just got some just for fun questions, and then I'll get you out. I'll get you out of here, man. No right or wrong answer to some of these. Next year, would you rather win 9 games and beat Clemson, or go undefeated through the regular season and get blown out by Clemson in the ACC championship game?
It depends on who the 9 are, and it's it's tough because there's no really good 3 losses on the schedule. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, we're playing 3 top 10 teams coming into the year. So like if we were able to drop those as close losses, it wouldn't be great, but it would make sense. No, but so you're talking 10-3 with a win over Clemson to win the ACC championship and an Orange Bowl to maybe get to 11. That's tough to turn down, man. I mean, but the 12-0 and then get blown out. We saw that in 2017. It was 10-0 and then things fell apart before we got to Clemson even. But oof.
Got to pick one.
Give me the 9-3 beating Clemson to get to 10.
9-3 and take down the big dog.
I mean, because if we go 12-0 and then we get blown out by them again, on top of the last 2 times that we played them being 93-3 in favor of Clemson, nah, I can't have that. Nah, give me 9-3 and beat Clemson.
Okay. Speaking of that 2017 team, who do you think would win in the game? This year's Miami Hurricanes team or Malik Rozier, Ahmad Richards' 2017 team?
Oof. 2017. Nah, I don't see the thing for
Travis
me is
Homer.
No, no. It doesn't even come down to that. And everybody listening to me probably knows what I'm thinking. It comes down to the fact that I don't trust Malik Rozier. I didn't trust him that year. We won games in spite of him that year. So I cannot sit here and lie and say that I would pick them. It has to be this year's team.
You going with the 2020 Miami Hurricanes, okay?
Yeah.
Who do you think, in your opinion, is the most underrated Miami Hurricane of all time?
Oof, man. I mean, the list is long and distinguished of guys who were not as well thought of as possible. I could start at the top and say Dan Morgan, who is arguably the best Miami Hurricane or the best linebacker, and that's without contribution. He is the best college linebacker ever to play at Miami, and people don't think of him because, you know, they have other favorites, you know, for what they did in the NFL. But if you look at Dan Morgan in college, he was better than anybody you want to name at linebacker. I don't care. Name him. He was better than them. So there's one. Overall, though, man, God, I don't even know. I mean, there's just so many. I mean, and the thing is, you know, even if you're a role player on some of those championship teams, like you could have been better. You know, Kenny Calhoun breaking up the play for the first national championship. Nobody really talks about him too much. You know, you got Walt Bellamy. It's Black History Month. He was the first black player ever to be on scholarship in Miami. Nobody really talks about him much. You know, if you got George Myra Sr., nobody, you know, thinks about him anymore. If you have Ted Hendricks, the Stork, you know, he's a guy who's, again, an NFL Hall of Famer, but not really at the forefront of the thoughts and minds of people. So, I mean, I could couch that in so many different ways. For me, I will say, I said this, I think, somewhere else. Freshman Frank Gore was not. Go back and watch freshman Frank Gore. I know that we've seen him in the league for, you know, 15, 18 years. I know that we saw what he did after he came back from, you know, the multiple ACL tears and things like that. Go back and watch freshman Frank Gore. That kid was, yeah, just freshman. That kid was different. He's the guy that everybody was mentioning without mentioning the name for the fact of the 2001 Hurricanes running the score up on people because they were scoring in the fourth quarter. But this is a guy who would take runs off tackle and off guard in the fourth quarter and break loose. He had 3 carries for almost 170 yards in one game because they couldn't catch him. Like he was out the frame. I mean, freshman Frank Gore was a different kind of beast. That's the one that I'll say.
Okay. All right, Cam, you're the quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes. You're going down to score the game-winning touchdown. And you can only throw it to one receiver for the touchdown. Who are you throwing it to? Michael Irvin, Santana Moss, Reggie Wayne, or Ahmad Richards?
Of those guys, the playmaker. Number 47.
Going to the playmaker?
I'm going to the playmaker, Michael Irvin. Yeah. Of those guys. Because, I mean, Santana. Okay, wait. What distance are we talking about? Because that matters.
Let's say you're in the red zone. We'll go red zone.
Okay, so it cannot be Santana because he's smaller. And I know that Santana is great and everything, but for the purpose of this, I'm going to remove him because he's 5'9". So then that leaves you Reggie Wayne, playmaker, and Ahman Richards. Ahman Richards broke playmaker's freshman receiving record, but overall, I think playmaker's ceiling was higher. So then it comes down to playmaker and Reggie Wayne, who left Miami as the career receptions leader, while Santana Moss was the career reception yards leader when they both left. So it's down to those two. I just think, and again, Reggie Wayne is great, and I believe he's going to get into the Hall of Fame for the NFL. Of those two, especially in college, Michael Irvin earned that nickname of the playmaker. When you needed a play, you went to number 47. That's why he just had a knack for being there in the big moments and stepping up in huge ways. That's why I'm going with Michael Irvin. Yeah.
I get 50. I get Irvin and Santana Moss. Those are the two that people most of the time they say. If you could eat dinner with 3 former Miami Hurricanes, who would it be and why?
Eat dinner with 3 former Miami Hurricanes. Oof. Jerome Brown, God rest the dead, just because he had the energy that I would have loved to have been around. You know what I mean? He had that edge to him, that swag that I definitely would love to just have, share a meal with and just see it in this natural state. So that's one.
It's so many unique and great lines you would want to pick that it's tough. It's a tough question.
It is. Jimmy Johnson. Just for what you're saying of picking his brain. Well, no, I'll remove him because if we're talking players, Jerome Brown is number 1. I'll say Andre Johnson, number 2, just because he's not a man of many words. So I would love to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and just get to know him, one day, just having dinner and a couple of cocktails. And then Philip Buchanan, because, I think that he's an interesting person. I know that he says some wild things, but I think that would be entertaining, and actually sitting there and not just having a wild tweet or 2, but a night where it's just cool, we're having dinner and drinks and just okay, I get the headline, I get the, whatever, but don't just give me the headline. Give me the whole article. You know what I mean? Give me the details beyond that to support what you're saying, because there has to be more than just the shock value of the first thing. You know what I mean? And I think it would be interesting to see where that went when there's more of an explanation, not just one wild, crazy statement. Continue down that path.
Yeah, I've actually got him on. A lot of people think he's underrated. Do you think he's underrated as a Miami Hurricane?
Absolutely he is. He, as a punt returner, kick returner, defensive back, both on the outside and in the slot, Philip Buchanan did a lot. He did a lot. He did a lot of heavy lifting in between. He was like the mortar between the bricks on that defense and in that secondary a little bit. He was a little bit of everywhere on that team. So, I think that he is maybe a little bit underrated as compared to some other people. But then again, it's tough because there were so many elite players on, those early 2000s teams that it's easy to overlook somebody like him who had a huge major impact in winning a championship and just, the run that they went on.
All right, Kim, and hey, I really appreciate this conversation. What do y'all got going on at the State of the U? You know, it's in the off season. So what are some of the things y'all got going on over there?
We're looking at spring practice right now, so doing our position previews and other kind of commentary there. And baseball is in full swing, so our baseball beat writer John Reynolds is already at the top of the game on that, and he's a must follow for Canes baseball. Basketball is going on as well, so Austin Pert, our lead basketball writer, is there. John Reynolds is also doing double duty covering women's basketball, and then just a variety of other kinds of things. We've got a couple new contributors who are adding in a variety of their own content, and just trying to keep things rolling. So yeah, it's a good time because we do have spring practice to kind of anchor our commentary right now, but we're always looking for new things, and we're looking at planning some things for the summer as well, because we try to obviously stay active and give you guys the content that you look for. So just all kinds of things like that. So if you guys are not aware, we're on social. That's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The State of the U. My personal account is at Underwood Sports on Twitter. The website is stateoftheu.com. So please come over and fan with us.